Hi everybody, my name is Mitch Reza. If you didn't know, I mean you're watching my channel, so you probably do know, but it's besides the point. Uh, I am here, like this. I decided to put a person behind the camera because I feel like it might be a bit more personal if I do that. I can also, move my hands around, give this artist a little more personality than what he has right now, which, to be frank, isn't much. So, I was actually gonna make this video to talk about my process of making my short film. That took 2 years, and I mean, worldwide release. Like, let's talk about that right here on YouTube. It did as well as you would expect. I mean, come on, we didn't have any high expectations for that, but uh, you know, 2 years of my life, and it did like that. It's fine. Anyway, that's besides the point. So I was going to talk about the video, give a little breakdown how you can make your own short film, and if you are interested in that, it is coming, but this video will not be about that. I decided after the many comments that I got, two comments, like around two comments. Anyway, the many comments that I got of people wanting to know how I make my landscapes. I thought, I got a video out. I got a video out where I make an entire landscape in an hour, but come on. Let's be honest. Who wants to sit here and watch an hour-long video of some kid rambling about making a landscape in Blender? I mean, I know me as a creator, if I saw a video that was an hour long and I have to watch that to be able to make a landscape project in Blender, I would be like, fuck no. Sorry, script that. Hell no. So I decided to turn this video into a tutorial on how you can make your own landscape for whatever you want. If you wanna make it as like a nice backdrop, I'll I have no idea what that was. Anyway, you want to make it as like a nice backdrop, I will show you guys kind of how you can, make it a bit more low poly, decimate it, whatnot. If you want it to be like the star of your show, like kind of what I do, just making landscapes. I'll show you guys how to do that. There will be a bunch of videos coming out. So my plan is to make a sort of tutorial that you can follow along, almost like Blender Guru's donut tutorial, where it's like 6, 7 videos of just making this one thing. And then at the end, I will also obviously release like a short video, which won't be as in depth. So I'm not going to give you my entire thought process and kind of explain what I'm doing and which shortcuts I'm using and like kind of how you can do it yourself. Um, but it'll just be more general, and that will be for people who are a bit more higher level, who already know how Blender works. Whereas this first one, now these videos are going to be for beginners. Obviously, if you're intermediate or whatever level you are, if you're even, 10 times better than I am or 2 billion times better than I am, you could still watch this video. I mean, you never know, you might learn something. So, that's kind of what these next upcoming videos are going to be about. Then, now that I have a persona, as we can say, I'm a little bit personified. You can, I have a body. I have a body. I will show you guys a bit more of my process in animating and stuff like that. Which, to be frank, I'm not the best animator. I mean, I've given my fair share of animating, but of course, as you can see, I might put a few clips here and there. My animating isn't the best, but it is something. I mean, something is better than nothing. So I'll kind of show you guys how I get my reference, how I do stuff. I might stand up, I might, move my hands around a bit in front of the camera to to use that as reference for my animation. So then I can also show you guys how I do that. I guess now that I have my disguise. Yes, it's very nice. It's a ski mask and sunglasses and a beanie. I mean, genius. Anyway, that is a short, actually quite long introduction of my YouTube channel and the future of what I'm going to do. And of what these videos are going to be about, right? So I say we get started. I say we get started and we make some cool Blender landscapes. I mean, honestly, do what you want with the landscapes. It's not that cool. I feel like there's so many cooler things that you could make. I feel like the landscape is more of like a starting point. You know, you have a landscape and then you build off from there. The only reason why I post landscapes is because, dude, I don't have time. I don't have time to make anything else. Yeah, it's not that funny. Well, I am going to get started, and I'll see you guys in the. Actually, you won't see me when I make the tutorials and the landscapes. I'm not gonna put a little camera there showing what I'm doing. Also, I don't have any other cameras. I mean, I'm using my laptop's camera, so I can't really show anything else. But you'll hear me. You'll hear me later. Bye. Okay, we are back. That took a while. I had to restart my laptop so that it would work at a normal speed, which hopefully it does now. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, good. So now the first thing we're gonna do is you come to Edit, References, and you're gonna install a few add-ons. So the add-on Sapling Tree and Node Wrangler. Those are the two add-ons that we're gonna use from just Blender. It just comes with Blender. You can just click on add-ons. Okay, cool. So, how do we make this landscape? Now, I assume if you're here, you know the basics of Blender. So, adding an object, yeah, that's pretty much all we need to do right now is add an object. But I assume you know like the basics, like how to navigate the, you know, scene collection stuff here, collections in general, and kind of just what your interface looks like. If you don't know any of that yet, I recommend following another tutorial. As I said, Blender Guru's Donut tutorial is a great tutorial to get familiar with the Blender space, the workspace. And once you're a bit familiar with that, you can then follow this tutorial. But if you're already familiar with it, you know how to like navigate around, add some objects, open up the shading viewport, go to cycles or Eevee, whatever. This is all in cycles, by the way. So if you want something for Eevee, you can do it in Eevee as well. It's just not going to look as good. And also, the geometry will be quite dense. You can make it less high poly, but it's still going to be pretty dense. So, now let's start. The first thing that I usually start off with is find reference. So, give me a sec. I'm going to find a cool mountain thing that we can make. Okay, I found the shot that I want to recreate, or not recreate. I'm gonna make my own thing, but my reference. So I will put it up. I have it on Instagram right now, so I will put the photo up so that you see what I'm trying to create. And this is kind of the first step. You want to find reference so that you can kind of figure out what the shapes look like, and what you want your final piece to look like. So for this, I think I'm going to kind of separate it into different parts. So we're going to have a foreground element, a midground element, and then a background element. Actually, no, we're only going to have a foreground and midground element. So you kind of just have to figure out how you want your scene to be split up. So let's start with creating the shapes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of block out what I want. So we're going to get something like this here. Oh, sorry, that happened by mistake. So you're just going to use scale up cubes and use that to kind of form what you want your shoot, sorry, my phone keeps on turning off. What you want your 3D landscape to look like. I'm just kind of figuring it out, moving stuff around. just trying to see what I can get that looks good. So just move this around and I'm going to put some more cubes right behind here. I don't know why I laughed. I'm so sorry. This isn't funny. This is difficult and this is stressful. But just play around, get something that you think you like. And once you do, so for me, I think this is pretty, pretty cool, pretty kooky, pretty cool, kinky. Um, mm, yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, this looks alright. Okay, so I'm not going to be using my reference anymore for the rest of the video because my phone keeps on turning off and it's irritating me. So we're just going to do something uh out of memory. I don't know. We're just going to kind of create something random. I'm also going to delete. I'm not going to delete the camera, but I will delete the light. And that's just for later. Yeah, I don't know. So now you're going to join everything together. The way I do that is with Control J. I think you can make your. I don't know if that's possible. How to do that? Okay. Well, okay, so it's an add-on, the screen keys. In later videos, I will make sure to have them visible. Look at the add-on, don't worry. For now, we are just gonna do it the old-fashioned way. I'm just gonna say what I'm clicking on. So to join these objects together, I clicked on Control J. Let's just go back. So it's Control Z that I just clicked on. Control J, and we joined all of the objects to the object that we selected. So in this case, it was this cube. And all of these cubes are going to join with this cube. Now, the reason why we're doing this is because then when we come to our shader, or our sculpt mode, we can then remesh it and we can get a uh, sort of full geometry block that we can work on. So right now, these are all separate objects, right? If we click on L, then you can select loose objects. So in this case, this is loose. This isn't attached to any of the other cubes in our mesh, and then I can move this around, right, separate. So also if I sculpt on it, so by clicking Control Tab, I can get this thing visible. So Control Tab, you can make this visible, and then Tab, you can swap between edit mode and object mode, which you can see up here, right? These are the different modes. So you can also go here, but Control Tab is faster for me. So Control Tab, and then I swipe to sculpt. Now, of course, as we can see here, it says object has non-uniform scale. And that's why our like sculpt brush looks so weird. So if I come here, right now we have barely any geometry. So if I try and change something, it's not going to do anything, right? Like it's barely doing anything because there's just no geometry to change. So let's come back into object mode. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to click on Control A and we are going to apply its scale. So what we see here is that all of these scales are different, right? We have 3.5 for the X, 4.4 for Y, the Z is 0.4. So we click on Control A, scale, it's all 1. And now when we go back to sculpt mode, our brush is normal. That doesn't solve our geometry problem. So that's why we're going to remesh. So the first thing that I'm going to do really quick is die and topo. So die and topo is essentially it creates geometry as you're working on it in triangles. So you'll see what it looks like right now. Click on OK. And when I come and sculpt, you can see that it's already turned some of these cubes into, or it's turned the quads into triangles. And now when I sculpt here, you can see kind of what is happening, right? And what we also see is that it is kind of sculpting, trying to sculpt on both meshes, but on both, sorry, meshes, but the meshes are separate. So we're not really getting any smooth transitions between the two meshes. So now I'm going to undo a bunch of stuff because that's not what we're trying to do. Let's see. I think this looks... Oh, we kind of undid a bit too much. Okay, cool. So now we've got our mesh back, and we are going to remesh. So what you're going to see what will happen when we remesh is that our entire geometry is going to become one. And we're going to get a lot more quads, so a lot more uh, geometry to work with. Sorry, that took me a while to come up with that word. Okay, there we go. This is a remesh of point 1. Let's keep it simple for now. We don't want too much detail, otherwise it's going to be difficult to work with. Right now we're just trying to get a general idea of what our landscape looks like. Now you're probably looking at this and you're like, okay, doesn't look like much, but when we go to edit mode, you can see all of the geometry that we have, and now it is all attached to each other. So also inside, you can see that the slots, the cubes don't go down. For example, this one, right? It's like all one big mesh. Let's come to sculpt mode. We are using the clay strips brush. This is my favorite brush in Blender for making landscapes. It works perfectly and it can help us get this almost rocky texture without needing to use any imported brushes or anything like that. Just use everything in Blender. So let's start with, trying to figure out where to start. Let's just start with, so this I just kind of start random. I just kind of figure out where I want to start sculpting. And in this case, I'll start here. I'm just going to kind of create like a little divot here. Honestly, at this point, I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of randomly sculpt around and just draw kind of regions in my on my geometry. And then just follow certain patterns. So you don't really see too many sharp edges like this in real life. So you're going to want to kind of sculpt that into each other, right? Because we don't want sharp edges. We want it to look very natural, like rock, like a rock formation or like mountains, right? So you're just going to kind of come through everywhere. And this takes a while. This is what's going to take you the longest, trying to create this mesh, right? So I use control. I click on control because what happens now when I first click is that it adds, and then when I click on control, it subtracts, right? And clicking on shift and then left clicking, you're smoothing. So control, left click, I'm kind of pushing in. Shift, left click, I am smoothing, and just left clicking, I am adding. Okay, cool. So that's kind of the basics for sculpting. And you can see that here too. This minus will then subtract, plus adds it, and then control is the inverse. So in this case, control now does minus. So let's continue. Um, yeah, just gonna kind of go around your scene. The navigation can sometimes be a bit funky, but it's fine. Just gonna kind of keep on rotating around. I usually do the entire thing depending on how good your computer is or laptop or whatever you're using. It can sometimes be better to only focus on the parts that are visible to the camera because that will help you save a lot of geometry in the long run. But I just tend to sculpt the entire mesh because sometimes I might duplicate the mesh and rotate it so that I have like different angles of the mountain and I can kind of make it look a bit more natural depending on what the scene is. In this case, for this scene, you wouldn't have to do that since it's only going to be from one angle or mainly one angle. But I'm still going to do it anyway because why not, you know? Why not? Why not? Yeah. It can be a little goofy working on it sometimes, you know? Just kind of gotta get, you just kind of have to get the feel for it. Sorry, I can't talk right now. After just, okay, I don't even know what I'm saying. Anyway, sorry. I am very, very sorry for the terrible conversation right now, but we're going to keep sculpting. So I'm going to sculpt a bit more. I'm going to finish off the base sculpting, and then I will come back and I will show you guys how to do the details. So cue the time lapse. Okay, a quick thing. Sorry, quick pause in the time lapse. One thing is where is it? Where is it? If you come to advanced, you could put front faces only, because sometimes what might happen is that it will also work on the back faces. So now, of course, you can see that this kind of has less effect on some of the other faces. It can help sometimes. So I usually put it on front faces only. Yeah, that was it. That was the quick little break in between. So there you go. These are like the settings of the brush. So you can change these settings of the brush depending on what you want. I would suggest just playing around with that, and you can kind of figure out what you want to do. What you don't want to do. Okay, another quick cut from the time lapse. I'm so sorry. Um, One thing that you also see a lot in nature is like points that peek out. So that's something that you're also going to want to create in your mesh. I'm going to talk a bit more about this in the detailing section, but for now, I think this is pretty good. Pretty. It's a pretty good mesh. It's a pretty good mesh. Okay, so now of course you can see I've got this, which when you look at it, you're probably like, ew, that looks so ugly. And you're right, it does. It looks really bad at the moment. So usually when I've created my base like this, I will kind of figure out where I want my camera placed. So in this case, and then based on that, I resculpt some areas, right? So like I'm gonna resculpt this area a little. Yeah. So this area back here, I do want it to be closed off. So I'm just gonna kind of like sculpt this thing a little more. So right now we are going to start with the placement of our camera. So let's say we want our camera around here. I think this is a pretty cool angle. You can also start with the placement of your camera. I think that's actually the smartest thing before you start sculpting, depending on your laptop or computer, or whatever. You already have a camera on scene, so we forgot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Control Alt Numpad 0. So not your normal 0. That won't do anything. Numpad 0 will move the camera to your current location. So this is for TikTok. So I'm going to change the resolution. Actually, you know what? No, we'll do a TikTok video another time. For now, I'm going to create like a cool cinematic shot. So I'm going to make this 2560 by 1080 pixels. I don't know why I said it like that. 2560 by 1080. Anyway, so the next thing I do is I come to camera right here because we've got our camera selected, as you can see. And then I come to viewport display and I make it the passer per 2. Probably pronounce it like absolute shit, but I make that 1. And then I play around with the perspective, so with my angle. So go N, view, this is N, click on N, view, and then lock camera to view. So the second one. I just move it around my camera a little. Squeak, squeak. Sorry, I'm making weird noises. Just until I get like a angle that I like. Okay, and again. And then I play around with the focal length. So if I want something like this, maybe I'll put it a bit more up. Move it a tiny bit to the side. Now we'll save. So I'm gonna save this to my random projects. Don't look at my stuff. Look at the stuff that I have. So YT video, random project. Yeah, my naming is terrible. Don't question it. Just name your project however you want to name it. But now we're gonna start with the details. and our mesh is going to become a lot more high poly. So this is a good point to save. Make sure you save. Okay, cool. So we know that essentially currently our camera is facing in, let me get my pen. Here we go. It's facing in this direction, right? So this area is going to be the area that we're going to want to focus most of our attention on, like detail the most. So that's what we're going to do. Let's come here, delete that because we don't need that anymore. Um, I'm gonna control tab, sculpt mode, dye and topo. So this is where I go in with the dye and topo. You can also remesh and up your remesh and voxel size and whatnot. So if you make a smaller voxel size, that's essentially going to be the size of these little cubes, these little squares. So a very low voxel size when you remesh is going to give you a lot of geometry. Since we only want geometry in certain regions, and it doesn't really matter for our shading, since we're not going to UV map or UV project anything, we can just we can have bad geometry essentially. So we're going to make sure that we have the shittiest geometry that you've ever seen in your life. And that's what we're going to do right now. So here you can see that our mesh from what we just sculpted essentially already has this pattern, this natural pattern. And that's what we're going to want to build upon with our detail. So, you're just going to go back in with these strokes. So I have my dye and topo set to 12 pixels, and I've got it on relative detail. You can also do constant detail. Constant detail essentially means that at every single point you're going to be using the same detail, as you can see. Now, relative detail depends the on how close you are. So here, when I zoom out more, there's less detail. When I zoom in a lot, there's more detail. Essentially, it's just relative to your to how zoomed in you are, right? To your position in space, essentially. So we're just going to kind of come in here and use that clay strips brush to kind of work our way through the landscape, right? So just kind of figure out the natural curves that you see in your landscape, right? So I see some curves here. So I'm just going to kind of make this a bit more deep. Kind of pull that out. Come here. I see some lines here. So we'll work on those lines and make that a bit more detailed. Same here. So we're just going to kind of create these lines. You just go back and forth, sculpting up and down, and then sometimes at some point I will lower my detail. So I'm going to continue sculpting this. This will be a time lapse, and then I'm going to show you when I lower my detail again. Yeah, so sorry. Okay, so to change the strength of your brush, you can click on Shift F. Oh, sorry, that was I think okay. I think Control F. Control F is the angle. I don't know what that does. I'm sorry. So you've got F changes the size, Control F the angle, which I have no idea what that does, and Shift F changes the strength. So this is very strong. This is not as strong, right? You can see that. And you can also change the fall off when you come here to the brush. You can change the type of fall off that the brush has. But in this case, we are just going to go with smoother. It's one I usually use, and it works great. Okay, so when I want to make some areas a bit sharper, I'm going to use the crease brush. So similar to how the clay strips brush works, I'll use control to kind of like tighten areas. So here you can see that it starts to subtract, so it's gonna push our geometry in. So when we want to tighten some areas, we'll push the geometry out. So I'll just use this to make some areas a little sharper, and that can give us just a little more interesting geometry. So I also use this to make areas a bit more boxier, you know? So why I'm drawing is I'm essentially kind of picking out the areas that need a bit more detail. So some of these areas just need a tiny bit more detail just to look a little better, less blocky. And so I just kind of draw on it to kind of select the areas that I want to add this extra detail to, right? So currently I've selected a few areas and then I'm going to come out and then I can kind of see, okay, this is where I want to sculpt a tiny bit more. This is where I need to add a bit more higher detail. And this is also around the time that I will then up my, oh, sorry, oops, I'm in the annotation there, that I will up my die topo detail from 12 to 6. So the smaller the detail size, it's like you can see it as the amount of pixels that you're detailing, right? So if I have a very small size, that means that essentially every single pixel I'm going to add this much detail to, right? So it's the smaller the size, the more detailed or the more geometry you're going to be adding, right? So now I'm adding like very small triangles to make it very detailed. So that's what I'm going to start doing right now in some of these areas. So like in this area, for example, I want just a bit more detail, give it a bit more texture, and then I would have almost finished my base mesh, and that will be the first part of the video. I think that's around it for the beginning. So this is kind of what our mesh looks like so far. And this is going to be the first part of our three-part series of how to make your landscape in Blender. So in this first part, we figured out how to sculpt the landscape and kind of create it. And in the next part, we are going to talk all about texturing and how you can make your landscape look a lot more rocky and grassy, whatever you need. You can add as much detail as you want. You know, it's not limited. You can go crazy. You can also add a lot less detail and rely more on the texturing. And I'll explain that in the next video, how you can kind of figure out what a right balance is, because obviously if you have a very high dense mesh, you're going to have to rely less on giving your mesh this rocky texture through texturing, and you can just play more around with like the colors and the placement of the grass and stuff like that. Versus if you have a very low mesh, like low poly mesh, you can add a lot of like roughness through texturing. So we will explain all of that in the next one. I'm sorry if this was a little bit fast. Give me some tips on how you want me to make these tutorials. If you want me to focus a lot more on the sculpting aspect, like kind of how I learned how to sculpt, I can maybe make a video on that too. And also, if you have any tips for me, if you see something that I did wrong that you think I could do a lot better, let me know. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to learn and grow. And so I would also love to, learn more about Blender, learn more about the features and stuff like that. If you know what that angle shit is for, please tell me. I would love to know. I'm probably gonna search it up myself, but still, I would love to know. And so in the next video, we're gonna talk about texturing, and then the video after that will be about the volumetrics, the grass, the trees, the little squirrels. I don't know what I'm gonna add, but the stuff that I will then add to make it really feel like an actual nature landscape. Thank you for watching this first part of the video. The second and third part will come up soon. I don't know how I'm gonna schedule it. It might be like once every few days, but yeah, that was it for the first part of the tutorial. Now try follow it and let me know how it went. And if you have any tips or anything, please let me know.